It's a teacher, it's a fighter, it's an acrobat, it's an ambassador. When it first took to the skies in August of 2002, the Korea aerospace industry's T-50 Golden Eagle was meant to be a humble trainer aircraft, a first foray into homegrown fighter aircraft production for South Korea, and a tentative step into what was, at that time, a nascent military-industrial complex. In the 2 decades since, the Golden Eagle has spread its wings in a way that nobody had imagined and transformed itself into not just a South Korean success story, but a pioneering invention, and one that set the stage for South Korea's growing role as one of the biggest military producers in the entire world. And today on Mega Projects, we're going to be digging into the T-50 Golden Eagle, how it was made, how it works, what it can do, and how it inspired a tectonic shift in defense across the entire modern world. Now, the aircraft that would later evolve into the T-50 was conceived in the early 1990s when South Korea looked fundamentally unlike what it's grown into today. At that time, South Korea's annual GDP was less than a sixth of what it is today, and it was just coming off 9 years under military strongman Chung Do-hwan, and it was turning into a democratically elected administration that had essentially become an extension of the prior dictatorship. Just before we continue today, have you ever wondered about your roots, where your great-great-grandparents roamed, what they were up to, where they lived? Well, I've got the answer for you. My heritage. Look, I used to be a bit in the dark about my family history, never really talked about it very much, and look, when you get back a few generations, people just don't really know anymore. But with My Heritage, you can find out. They are the #1 family history service, trusted by a whopping 90 million users. And building your family tree is incredibly easy. What you do is you add your parents, you add yourself, your grandparents, anyone you know, and then basically you go from there and you work out where all the connections are. And then when someone else has got a family tree, you can connect it together and be like, oh, look, they've done all this work there, and they'll get all of the work you've done, and it just makes this big family tree which is constantly expanding. I found out the address, and I saw census records of my great grandparents, and then I was like, oh, I wonder what their house looks like. And so I looked it up on Google, and you're like, oh, look, that house is still there. That's where my great-great-grandparents lived. How weird is that? It's really cool. There are 19 billion records at your fingertips, old photos, documents, you name it. Another one I found was my great-granddad as a fighter pilot in World War I, a photo of him in a parade or something, or a picture where they take everyone's picture together. And guess what? My Heritage not only brings history to life, but also your family photos. Black and white, no problem. My Heritage can colorize, enhance, and even animate them. So here's the deal. Sign up for a 14-day free trial, and if you decide to continue, My Heritage is giving you a whopping 50% discount. Just click the link in the description box below. Don't miss out on discovering your family's journey. Thanks to My Heritage for sponsoring, and now back to it. The Korean aerospace industry was practically nothing compared to what it would eventually become. The country's best indigenously produced military aircraft was a turboprop-powered basic training aircraft called the KT-1, and its work alongside Lockheed Martin to produce a Korean version of the F-16 was still in relatively early stages. But even as early as 1992, South Korea had decided that it was looking to scale up its capacity to produce military aircraft, and specifically, they were after a high-quality, high-capability trainer aircraft that was capable of filling a dual role as a light attack aircraft. Not only would such an aircraft be a valuable addition to South Korea's arsenal and give the country valuable experience in developing different kinds of aircraft, but it would ensure that when Lockheed Martin's F-16 stopped being produced in South Korea, through the Samsung company by the way, that those assembly lines would still have something to assemble. The program got a name in 1992, the KTX-2. It got a partner, Lockheed Martin, who were glad to contribute their engineering capabilities and expertise to the project. After all, the best plane in South Korea's arsenal was already the F-16, so rather than simply wait for South Korean technicians to dismantle and replicate components of the F-16, Lockheed Martin decided to participate and see if they could add a bit of forward progress into the design as well. On the South Korean side, the design process was handled by Korea Aerospace Industries, a defense company that was, at the time, basically run and handled by 3 very recognizable names: Samsung, Hyundai, and Daewoo Heavy Industries, or more specifically the aerospace divisions of each of those companies. The project got off to a bit of a rocky start in its first years, though. Despite early exploratory design work, it had to be suspended in 1995 amidst the Asian financial crisis. But within 4 years of its suspension, the KTX-2 program was able to come back in full swing and produce a basic design, one that looked a whole lot like the Korean version of the F-16. The plane got a bigger and bigger boost from South Korea as time went on. By early 2000, it had received its official designation, the T-50, and its name, the Golden Eagle. A prototype was built through most of the year 2001. It was tested and evaluated on the ground, and by August of 2002, the Golden Eagle soared into the skies for the very first time. Said its test pilot when asked about the experience, "This was a very enjoyable flight. The T-50 is very easy to fly. If future flights are as successful as this one, we should have a great advanced jet trainer." Whether that was a statement by the test pilot or by a PR team, we'll leave that for you to decide, but the flight was a resounding success either way. From its early days as a prototype, the T-50 was meant to be an export product. Lockheed Martin and KAI established an international marketing company to hawk the plane abroad. The United States reserved its own T-50 designation under the assumption that it would pick up its own models, and South Korea began to curate a list of third nations who would be interested in picking up some models of their own. By late 2003, South Korea's own Air Force had put down an order for 25 of the planes, with the first delivery slated to start less than 2 years later. International customers were told that they could get their first deliveries as early as late 2006, and by South Korea's own projections at the time, production on the plane would be able to wrap up by 2011. These projections, of course, ended up being a bit optimistic. We'll get more into the T-50's life around the world in just a little bit, but for now, it's suffice to say that those exports wouldn't begin for nearly a decade after the first production line T-50s became available. Yet, at least in South Korea, the T-50 was a welcome and much-needed addition to the country's Air Force. Now South Korea could phase out its older trainer and light attack aircraft and train its next generation of pilots on a plane that would offer a gateway into the F-35 Lightning II, then hardly a twinkle in Lockheed Martin's eye, as well as other fighter aircraft that were in consideration for South Korea, including the Dassault Rafale and the Eurofighter Typhoon. By 2011, the TA-50, the T-50's light attack variant, had entered service with the Republic of Korea Air Force, and they'd become the aircraft of choice for the Black Eagles, South Korea's flight display acrobatics team. So, now that we understand how the T-50 came to be, let's take a little look under the hood and see what exactly it's packing on South Korea's behalf. Coming in with a wingspan of 31 feet and a length of 43 feet, the plane is just a tiny bit smaller than the F-16, with a wider two-seater fuselage to make room for a training instructor as well as a pilot. The plane sits at a height of 16 feet and weighs a bit over 7 tons when empty. When it's filled, that weight nearly doubles to just north of 13.5 tons. It's powered by one General Electric F404 afterburning turbofan, producing a hair under just 12,000 pound-force of thrust, or 18,000 if you hit the afterburners. When in flight, the T-50 can hit a top speed of 1,141 miles an hour or 992 knots, or if you're looking for the really important figure, that's 1.5 times the speed of sound. That capability alone places the T-50 among the most impressive training aircraft in the world and makes it a critical gateway trainer to be able to fly some of the most advanced planes of the modern era. It flies with a range of 1,150 miles and can peak at an altitude of 48,000 feet. And it can hit that altitude, by the way, in just over a minute, in a blast-off that, if any members of the Republic of Korea Air Force are listening, we here at Mega Projects would be very keen to experience. In terms of armaments, the more modern attack version of the aircraft comes equipped with a 3-barrel electric rotary cannon and 7 hardpoints, including 4 under the wings, 2 on the wingtips, and 1 under the fuselage. The plane is capable of carrying Hydra or large air rockets, Sidewinder or AMRAAM air-to-air missiles, several types of air-to-ground and anti-ship missiles, a whole suite of guided and unguided bombs, and the Lockheed Martin-made sniper targeting pod, which enables the plane to identify and autonomously track targets and receive precision weapons guidance at long range. The plane's avionics are particularly impressive for a trainer aircraft and have gotten better with time. Its most recent update is the Raytheon Phantom Strike, a seriously powerful fire control radar that Raytheon hopes to make a mainstay of global export products. The Golden Eagle is equipped with triple redundant digital fly-by-wire technology, and later generation models feature 5th generation cockpits. The plane also comes with provisions to add various other types of weapons, both produced in South Korea and elsewhere, with a focus on providing the capability to graft on whichever armaments a given nation would like to train its new pilots on. As of 2023, South Korea has developed a number of variants on the T-50 base design. The T-50, as first established, serves as a trainer aircraft for pilots to use after they've been trained on the basics of subsonic jet flight. The T-50B was a specially manufactured group of planes made for the Black Eagles, while the TA-50, or trainer attack version, was the first edition light attack version of the aircraft. Its successor, the FA-50 or fighter attack version, was first flown in prototype form in 2011, and the FA-50 has received several block upgrades integrating new technologies and avionics alongside a probe to enable in-flight refueling. Finally, the F-50 was a single-seater multi-role fighter version of the plane initially proposed to help fill out South Korea's fighter arsenal. That variant was later cancelled in favor of South Korea's current advanced fourth-generation fighter that's in development, the KF-21 Boramae. Relative to the rest of South Korea's arsenal, the Golden Eagle stands out as its best trainer aircraft by a wide margin. But far more notable is how it stacks up against the rest of the nation's fighter aircraft. 60 copies of the FA-50 variants serve alongside South Korea's combat aircraft arsenal, eclipsing the abilities of the country's 24 F-4 Phantom and 182 F-5 aircraft by a wide margin. In its role, it could capably stand alongside RAKF's over 200 F-15E and F-16 aircraft, and in its primary intended role as an attack aircraft in a potential war with North Korea, it's more than capable of striking targets all across the North while soundly kicking the asses of the vast majority of North Korea's own combat aircraft if it needs to. Now, the T-50 hasn't seen much action with South Korea, and of course we've got to stress that that is overall a really good thing. No action by the T-50 means no major war. Everybody wins. But that's meant, at least in general, the T-50's service life in its native country has been relatively uneventful. The aircraft has participated in weapons testing operations and flown patrols across and around the Korean peninsula, but until and unless South Korea finds itself at war, and, well, knock on wood on that one, the T-50's attack variants will sit on ice while its trainer model goes on doing exactly the job for which it was intended. However, it's the Philippines who've gotten the most use, by far, out of the FA-50's combat capabilities. The Philippines have 12 of the aircraft in their own air force, the PAF, and they were the nation to give the Golden Eagle its first taste of combat. That sortie took place on the 26th of January 2017, when two of the planes conducted a night attack on terrorist cells in the municipality of Butig in Mindanao. The attack was a success, killing several members of the Islamic State in the Philippines while clearing the way for a ground force advance. The aircraft has participated in further operations against Islamic State in the intervening years, and it's engaged in several live-fire training exercises in which it sank its seaborne targets. Tragically, the planes were also involved in a friendly fire accident during the Battle of Marawi, when a bomb landed some 250 meters off of its intended target and killed 2 Philippine soldiers, with 11 others being injured. The aircraft itself was not found to be at fault in the incident, and the Philippines have consistently demonstrated an interest in acquiring more. But as it stands right now, that's the extent of the T-50 and FA-50's combat history. It's a new plane in most of the global arsenals where it's used today, and in the ones that have held onto it for upward of a decade, it's had virtually no need to serve in a combat role. That said, it's responsible for training well over 2,500 students around the world, according to Lockheed Martin's own website, and it's proven able to train those students for a transition not just into 4th, but 5th generation aircraft as well. Now, at this point, we'd be willing to bet that you're waiting for the other shoe to drop. For the moment, we deliver on the promise to explain just why this impressive but relatively inexperienced trainer aircraft is such a big deal. Now, the reason isn't its combat performance. It's the plane's exports around the world, and in that regard, the Golden Eagle is just getting started. In the plane's first decade or so of production, South Korea and Lockheed Martin had good reason to believe that the program was bordering on being a disappointment. Export buyers hadn't come in large enough numbers to justify continued production. Israel had considered the craft but decided to look elsewhere in 2012, and Singapore had done the same 2 years earlier, with both countries deciding they'd choose the Italian-made Air Macchi M346 Master as an advanced trainer instead. Indonesia had picked up 16 copies of the T-50 with a contract signed in 2011, all of which had been delivered by January of 2014, just 1 month after Iraq signed its own contract for 24 of their light attack FA-50 variants. The Philippines, as we mentioned, had picked up 12, but these total 52 planes, while certainly not nothing for the South Korean aerospace industry, fell markedly short of expectations against what they'd hoped the Golden Eagle might become. When Thailand ordered just 4 of the planes in 2015 and a handful more in 2017, it seemed like that might be that. The T-50 production line would close not with a bang as intended in 2011, but with a bit of a whimper. But all that began to change in the months following Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, when nations around the world were shocked to see the brazenness with which Russia attacked its smaller neighbor and were forced to consider just what they, themselves, would be capable of doing in self-defense if they ever needed to. One nation that was particularly spooked was Poland. And by July of that same year, Poland's defense minister had announced that they intended to purchase a full 48 Fa-50 attack variants, nearly as many as all prior export sales combined. The plane was part of a massive $14.5 billion arms deal with Poland, in which South Korea would also supply self-propelled howitzers and main battle tanks. When asked why the Fa-50 was the choice for Poland's air defense needs, the Polish government didn't mince words. They desperately wanted to get the last of their Russian-made MiG-29 and Su-22 fighter aircraft out of their inventory, and the Fa-50 would arrive far faster than Lockheed Martin-made F-16s, while offering similar system capabilities at a lower overall cost. Of the 48 aircraft Poland ordered in July 2022, 12 have already been delivered as of January 2024, with the rest apparently well on their way. And once Poland's mammoth order came through, the floodgates had opened. In February of 2023, Malaysia announced that it would procure 18 Fa-50s, beating out India's Tejas multi-role fighter, Turkey's Herjet, Russia's MiG-35, China's L-15, and the joint Sino-Pakistani JF-17, and even the Italian trainer that had beaten out the Fa-50 in Israel and Singapore, the M-346. Malaysia has since expressed interest in doubling their order to a total of 36, and it doesn't stop there. Building on a deal to provide surface-to-air missiles to the United Arab Emirates, South Korea has offered the UAE 60 Golden Eagles at a potential value of $4.5 billion. In 2022, Colombia committed to acquiring a minimum of 20 TA-50s and more advanced FA-50s, again beating out the M-346. Egypt has signed a deal to produce the T-50 aircraft locally, with potential to add up to 100 of the aircraft to their inventory. The T-50 is in competition for an order of up to 36 aircraft to serve the Bolivian Air Force, and South Korea has apparently assessed the interest they've received recently on the Golden Eagle to be significant enough that it's worth building 2 new production lines in 2024. Best of all, South Korea appears on the precipice of securing a tremendously lucrative contract with the United States to produce 64 aircraft for the US Navy in the coming years. It competes alongside a proposed Boeing aircraft, the T-7B, and again, the Italian-made M-346. That contract could grow and extend to Fa-50 attack variant aircraft after Boeing's T-7A has experienced continued delays and cost overruns, and as the clock ticks down to replace attack aircraft like the A-10 Warthog. In the 2020s, the Golden Eagle appears to be on its way toward a renaissance around the world, and its successes aren't strictly limited to its export contracts either. Instead, the T-50 is a cornerstone to South Korea's recent initiatives to drastically scale up its role as a global arms manufacturer. In the span of just a few years, South Korea's arms sales have increased at exponential rates, driven by foreign interest from countries who've seen what nations like Poland have seen. That in the coming decades, it's going to be very important for nations to have their own military capability and hold their own if their more powerful neighbors start getting aggressive while their international allies fail to come through as promised. And for nations looking for potential arms suppliers with a track record of producing relatively cheap, relatively advanced, highly effective fighter aircraft on short notice, then the Golden Eagle is a standout offer compared to what the rest of the world has. It's got some of the most sophisticated equipment and capabilities of any trainer aircraft worldwide. It's versatile enough to perform with high competence in an attack or light fighter role, and recent orders by Poland, Malaysia, Colombia, and others have proven that this plane is a smart, trusted investment. With attention toward the T-50 comes attention toward all of the other fancy weapons South Korea's got to offer, and more lucrative arms packages will follow on from there. On our sister channel War Graphics, we've actually recently published a more extensive video on South Korea's effort to shift the global balance of power largely through these arms sales, so do check that out if you'd like to learn more. But for now, suffice to say that the Golden Eagle and other early South Korean exports have directly paved the way for this new era to follow. Across the world, nations are realizing that South Korean arms are the way of the future, and in particular, that South Korean aircraft are the natural fit to their air forces. In Poland, the success of the deal to procure F-A-50s has led to increasing interest in procuring the Kf-21 Boromai when it enters production, alongside the fifth-generation F-35 aircraft that had previously captured Poland's interest. Not only that, but Korea Aerospace Industries is expected to collaborate with Poland to build a center to service and maintain its Korean-made aircraft, building valuable inroads for a larger military-industrial relationship that both countries seem interested in developing. Conversations around the T-50 appear to have similarly paved the way for the Boromai in the United Arab Emirates, where military leaders seem to prefer the lowered export controls that would come with an indigenously produced South Korean aircraft compared to American or European models. But even after the Boromai takes to the skies, the T-50 will have decades of service ahead of it in a growing number of global air forces, and at unit counts quickly rising through the hundreds upon hundreds. In a worldwide aerospace environment that's obsessively focused on next-generation fighter aircraft, hypersonic missiles, and the future of unmanned aerial vehicles, it's aircraft like the humble Golden Eagle that will do the real work of filling most nations' arsenals. And when it comes time for those nations to pick between the Golden Eagle and the competition, their decision seems to be getting easier by the day.